this area, and the first couple rooms we're going down into today have been known to local farmers and ranchers for well over a century. It wasn't until 1960, though, that the full extent of the caverns was discovered. At that point, 4 college students from St. Mary's University in San Antonio got permission from the landowner to come out here and make a few trips through the cavern to see what they could find. She gave them 4 opportunities, and on their first 3 trips, they basically just came through and explored and mapped the known area. But on the 4th trip, one of the explorers, Orion Knox, built a draft on the back of his neck, which to an experienced caver or spelunker means there might be a passageway. So they moved some rocks and rubble aside, found a 60-foot crawlway that led them to 2 miles of previously undiscovered cavern. And today I'll take you through a half mile of that, point out the other mile and a half at the very end. They found that passageway March 27th of 1960. Went back up, told the landowner what they'd found. She really didn't know what to do with it. She spent the next 3 years going to caves and caverns throughout the U.S., getting ideas for development. Development began out here in March of 1963, was completed on July 3rd of 1964. And on August 5th, 1964, the plaque over there on the bottom right was dedicated by the governor of Texas at the time, John B. Connally. It was the 4 discoverers as well as the 4 main cave developers. Plaque on the upper left is dedicated to Clara Wolfe Weiss Heidemann, who was the original landowner. Without her help and permission, this would never have been open to the public. It is still privately owned and operated. It's now her 2 grandsons that run everything out here, and that is without help from the government. And before we get started inside, I'll cover the rules with you real quick. Take a look at those. First off, do not touch or damage the formations. All the formations inside are still growing. If you touch them, it creates a waterproof layer that stops growth and turns the rocks black, so just make sure you're not doing that. We'll pass the touchstone about halfway through the tour, though. So if you do want to touch something, just wait till we get there, and then you can touch that one. No food or drinks allowed inside, so if you have that, toss it in the trash can back there. The only exception is bottled water. That's okay. If you do come up with trash on the tour, there's trash cans inside. Please use those. Don't throw anything on the ground. Rubber-soled shoes are recommended. If you don't have that, just make sure you're taking small steps, holding the handrails, just being careful. The trails inside are steep and wet. We're going down switchbacks like we came down to get into the sinkhole area. This room we're in is called the Bear Pit. The reason for that, when the explorers first came through here, one thing they found was the jawbone of an American black bear. It was about 8,000 years old. Also found a human thigh bone. Some Indian arrowheads and scrapers are about 5,000 years old. And those are all on display up at the visitor center, so you can see them after the tour. They do all suggest this area was used for shelter at one point. The sign back here is called the Texas Cavern Protection Act. It just says it's against the law to break, crack, rip on, or sell any part of the cavern. Otherwise, you get in trouble with the state too, so just make sure you're not doing that. It's kind of their way of reinforcing the do not touch rule. Up ahead on the left here, when we round this corner in a minute, we're going to go past an area called the Raccoon Rooms. When the explorers first went through there was a family of raccoons living in there. They have since moved out though, didn't really like the noise from the development, people running through their homes all the time. Down on the right, underneath the handrail, you'll see a little light sticking out. And that's the entrance to Discovery Crawlway, the 60-foot crawlway the explorers found that led them to the rest of the cavern. It's a very narrow crawl space, from 11 to 22 inches wide, so you can imagine 4 full-grown college students trying to squeeze through that. From there, we follow the trail down to the right. We'll go through a set of double doors called our vapor barrier. That's there that keeps the temperature and humidity in the cavern as close as possible to what it naturally was, 70 degrees with a 99% humidity. Which means past those doors, the trail's going to get wetter and warmer, so just keep that in mind. Be careful on the wet trails. We'll go down into an area called St. Mary's Hall. It's a little bit small for all of us to fit into, so it's going to branch to the left and the right. The left will be a dead end. You make your way around there first. You'll see some formations. Then once you've done that, you're going to follow me to the right. That's going to be the narrowest that trail gets. After that, it will open up to that. And St. Mary's Hall is named after St. Mary's University, the college the discoverers attended. It's at a depth of 90 feet. And all the depths that I mentioned to you today are measured down from the natural bridge, so that is your reference point. Any questions? You guys follow me? Let's take a look out to the left there and see some formations, and then we're going down here to the right after that.
Morning. How old? Linda?
He's 18 months.
It looks like ice cream, doesn't it? Ice cream mountain.
Yeah. Oh, that's where they came out.
Crawling.
So they came out.
Yeah. Well, they caught. Yeah, they probably caught 5. So, did they come and take this back?
Do we go back the same way?
We're going out a different way. This room we're in now is called Pluto's anteroom. We're at a depth of 108 feet. The reason it's called Pluto's anteroom, Pluto was the Roman god of the underworld. Anteroom means first room, and this is the first room the explorers found. Thanks to Discovery Crawlway up there. And this is a good room to show you the different formations you're going to see today. There's one generic name for all formations, which is speleothem. That's divided into two different categories. We've got dripstone, formed by dripping water, and flowstone, formed by flowing water. With flowstone, a short piece like these up here, it's called a ribbon. If it gets a little bit longer, like that one back there, it's called a curtain. If it gets longer still, which you're going to see later on, we call it a drapery. I'll show you that in one of the later. And then we also have dripstone, which you're probably more familiar with. We have stalactites that grow out of the ceiling. Stalagmites, they grow up out of the ground. Easy way to remember the difference. Stalactites hang tightly to the ceiling. Stalagmites might someday reach the ceiling. When they grow together, it forms a pillar or a column. We have another name for these narrow stalactites up here. They're also called soda straws because those are actually hollow on the inside like a drinking straw. Water flows down through the middle of those formations and leaves a deposit along the bottom, making them longer over time. But if one of those formations were to clog up, the water couldn't go through the middle anymore. It started flowing around the outside, making it wider. And at that point, it becomes a more familiar stalactite like this one up here. So all stalactites do begin as soda straws. And to tell you how these formations got here, all formations begin as rainwater. Rainwater travels down through the atmosphere and soil, picks up carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide mixed with the water makes a weak acid called carbonic acid. And that's the same acid that's in soda to make it carbonated. And that acid will come down through the limestone layers up above us, eats away at them and picks up a mineral called calcium carbonate. And that calcium carbonate then travels with the water until it hits the open air of these cavern rooms. And at that point, the carbon dioxide is released into the air. The calcium carbonate is deposited onto the formations as a crystalline mineral called calcite. So basically, all the formations are made of calcite. You got a question?
Is that what rock that got touched after when y'all were...
I'll tell you about that in just a second, all right? Just one step. Now, like I said, all the formations are made of calcite. So these formations take anywhere from 100 to 1,000 years to grow 1 cubic inch of formation, which is about the size of an ice cube. So they're very old. The shinier areas on that formation, it's called calcite crystal. And it's just a more pure form of the same calcite that makes up the rest of the formations of the cavern. You'll see that in a couple places today. And now, this area up here, this is a bat roost. That's where the bats used to hang out. And bats are mammals like we are. They have dirts and oils on their skin. And due to the constant touching of that area, the oil created a waterproof layer that prevented growth. The dirt turned their rocks black. That's why we ask you not to touch, so the rest of the cavern doesn't get that way. It's been over 5,000 years since we had any bats permanently living in these caverns, and that corresponds back to the collapse of the sinkhole. We think the bats were out migrating when that happened. It closed off their main entrance and they couldn't get back in. But for whatever reason, it has been at least 5,000 years. We do have another remnant of the bat though, and that would be the darker area right back over there. And that's called bat guano, which is just a nice way of saying bat poop. It's at least 5,000 years old, so thankfully it doesn't smell anymore. But because of the very high humidity inside of 99%, it was never able to dry out. It is still damp to the touch, and if you were to touch it, it'd probably stick to you. But please don't do that because there's nowhere to wash your hands on the tour, and we still have an hour left. So unless you want to walk for the next hour with bat poop on your hands, don't touch that. Back over there, we've got Chapel Hall. Behind that door, we're currently digging a tunnel. That tunnel is going to overlook one of the next two large rooms that we're about to go through. And the reason for that, when we get a whole lot of rainwater, those two rooms fill up with water. It makes it pretty difficult to give tours. People don't like swimming through a tour for some reason. So that tunnel will give us a way to bypass those rooms when they're underwater. Also show one of them off even if it is filled up. Should hopefully be done in around 8 to 12 months, and I'll show you later on where that's supposed to come out. Do you guys have any questions on anything so far?
No.
Well, up ahead, we're going to go down those switchbacks in just a second. There's 72 feet switchbacks. And pretty much all the way at the bottom, you'll watch for the living fern. It's the only living plant in the cavern. We think the seed came in on the foot of one of the explorers or developers and sat there until 1964 when they turned the electric lights on. And at that point, it sprouted and started to grow. It's been growing there ever since without seeing natural sunlight. So it's doing pretty well considering that. As for the switchback, start on the left side. It's going to make the first turn easier for you. Make sure you're holding the handrails, taking small steps, and being careful the trail is keeping wet. And take the turns as wide as possible to make them less steep for you.
Camera.
You have a wonderful imagination. You're seeing a lot of things I don't see.
The fern is right down here when you guys get all the way to the bottom of the upper left.
Isn't it amazing? Just from the water, how it's so incredible. The different designs in here. I'm just amazed by this.
Where are you? I can't find you. Wait, okay, I see you. Y'all look fine here.
This room's called Sherwood. It's called Sherwood Forest. The explorers didn't have any of the nice walkways we've been using. They had to walk right through the middle of everything. As they came through those tall, narrow stalagmites, they thought they would rather than out. A few unique formations to show you in here. The first one back there is called the Totem Pole. That's 32 feet tall, 6 to 8 inches wide. That is the second tallest column or pillar in the North Cabin. Back over here behind you, way down the ceiling. They're growing along a crack in that ceiling called a vertical joint. That vertical joint is one of three things we believe contributed to the creation of the cabin. Believe that anywhere from 120 to 140 million years ago, all of Texas was once covered by a warm, shallow sea. That sea deposited layers of sediment, plant and animal matter that hardened into the limestone layers throughout the cabin. Eventually the sea receded and left behind solid stone, and there were no formations at that point because there were no rooms at that point. This was also once an active earthquake region called the Balcones Fault Zone. It was those earthquakes that actually created the vertical joints, which are just cracks in the limestone. The third thing was the groundwater, the aquifer water, and that is flowing water. It's easier for water to flow through a crack than through solid stone, so that water flowed along the vertical joints, hollowing out large open spaces that later became the roof. Eventually the water table lowered. It's now about 50 to 100 feet below, so left this area exposed to the open air. And once that happened, rainwater began to seep in to create the formations. But that is all theory, so do with it what you will. Any questions on that? Down, that's the deepest point that you get to see on the tour today. That's where the aquifer rises up into these rooms when they fill up with water. And this room will fill all the way up to the ceiling. Water's actually gone as high as the top of those switchbacks and just came down and over the first bench into Pluto's anteroom. And the reason it's called Purgatory Creek, the explorers didn't get any walkways down there either. Down there there's nothing but mud, so as they trudged through all that mud, they said they felt like they were in purgatory, never wanted to do it again. Called it Purgatory Creek. Yes.
in front of that bar.
No, just stay in there, okay?
This room is called the Castle White Giant. We're depth of 150 feet. Second largest room on the tour today, 50 feet wide, 50 feet tall, 250 feet long. It's called the Castle White Giant because it's a large white room with a lot of large white formations in it.
Right.
First one over here is called the Bomb Room. Influenced by what looks like a group of mushroom clouds. Right down here beside the trail is the called Travertine Dam. It's a dripstone pool. Water fills one of those pools up, fills over the top of the dam into the next pool. As it's spilling over, we'll get a calcite deposit along the top of the dam, making it taller. They only grow larger when we have enough water to actively fill those formations and keep the water flowing. Example of the cave breakaway. Very long piece of flow system going out of that wall. I'm going to move up to the middle of the room and I'll show you the three more large formations up there. And as we're walking that way, be sure to watch the smiley face up there on the ceiling. A few more large formations in here. The first one over there is called the Watchtower. 50 feet tall, 6 to 8 feet wide. That's the tallest column or pillar in the North Cavern. Right up here we have some cave bacon. Red lines in that formation make it look like bacon. It's the mountain of the landlord, which to the explorers like a giant apartment complex. There's the doors on the bottom, windows on the sides, and the landlord up top on his pedestal. Right here we have the king's throne. We're close to the two armor, two bookstool, and a table. And a large black canopy, also looks like a jellyfish. A couple chandeliers up there on the ceiling. The king's a musician, so he always has his bongo drum. Couldn't get a watch dog, so you gotta watch frogs. You ever got him? He had a very large ice cream cone. And if he was still hungry after that, he also had a cupcake with a pterodon inside. Our cake was all set. I'm going to we leave this room, we're around the corner of the head here. We look out to the right, we can see an area called the Brindle's Canyon, 207 feet down, the second deepest point on the tour. And I'll tell you more about that later on when we get to the other side. So we're going to make our way up 35 stairs. And like that, the very first step, the highest water level ever rose to in history in 1991, corresponds to the water line all the way up there. You can imagine almost this entire room being underwater. And at the top of that area, that's where the tunnel from the chapel hall tunnel is going to come out. But the lookout area should be somewhere in this area. Does that have any questions?
The water dam.
It turns out it doesn't do any damage because there's no current to it. It flows for the system of that. If you had any current, you wear away at it.
Would that get that?
And then this is a touchstone if you guys want to touch it. It is an actual formation. We just left it there so people could touch it. If you look on the ceiling though, you're going to see that it's getting dripped on still. So it hasn't been touched so much, it can still be a growing formation. Those holes will act as a natural filter to pull out the contaminants, leaving us with clean water. Also in this room, this yellow formation above your head, called canvas. Ventilation shaft for that chapel hall tunnel that I told you they were digging. That should come out back there at the end of this hall where that light's at, hopefully about 8 to 12 months. So past the small room here on your right, my left, that's just the storage area, so don't worry too much about it. But as you pass that, be sure to look up at the ceiling here. You'll see these soda straws, and these are constantly dripping. The reason for that, same reason why this tunnel we're going to go through has very little formation in it. There are clay layers throughout that tunnel. The clay is too thick for the water to get through. So all the water that would ordinarily spread out through that whole tunnel concentrates back to this one spot. So these soda straws are always dripping, and that tunnel has very little formation in it. It is a natural tunnel though. It is also the only place in the cavern where you'd be walking on bedrock instead of on mud or formation or anything like that if it hadn't been developed. So it was the easiest area for them to develop. So any questions before we leave this area? Quick things in here. First off, if you watch the wall as you're walking through the tunnel, there's the clay layer. All the way through this little tunnel area that led to where up there. Right above, where do we go? Here it is. Right above me here, that's our second natural bridge. A little bit smaller than that first one. You see in these places the ceiling does look like it's almost ready to fall, but they have tested to make sure it's not going anywhere. They have a very scientific test they use involving a heavy person and a crowbar. Stick the crowbar in there and hang from, make sure it's not going anywhere.
That looks like a giant mushroom. Or flying saucer or starfish or something. Looks like a ring.
Yep. That's water. That's cool. That's fell from the ceiling.
It's neat, it's like seeing the earth, the way of the earth.
The one neat case up in Missouri, Zebulon, where we rode a train down there.
I didn't know either. I had no idea. Oh, no, man.
Down here as you guys come in, that's the other end of Grindle's Canyon. Connects back to the Castle of the White Giants. It's 207 feet from the natural bridge, 72 feet down there from where we're at right now. Down on the bottom of that area, sand, bedrock, mud. There is no water flowing through there, even though it made it look like it. There may be a little water cooled up, but no actual flow. There's very little formation in there also due to those clay layers that I was telling you about. And the reason it's called Grindle's Canyon, one of the explorers was an English major. He'd been reading the epic poem Beowulf. In that story, there's a monster known as Grindle. He thought that Grindle was a real creature, not just something from myth. He lived in a cave similar to that, so they call it Grindle's Canyon. And that is the way they first found this room we're in now, called the Hall of the Mountain King. We're at a depth of 135 feet. It's the largest room on the tour today. It's actually the largest underground showcase room in all of Texas. It's 100 feet wide, 100 feet tall, and 350 feet long. Which means it's actually big enough that if we felt like it, we could square everything out and put a football field in here. Just hasn't quite been worth the effort yet. You'll see the Mountain King at the top of the room, so then you'll understand how it got its name. But if you take a look at the ceiling from down here, you'll see it's a little different than many of the rooms we've been in. Maybe you saw that crack running over your head coming out of the tunnel. Another one right here. These are more vertical joints like I talked to you about earlier, just cracks in the limestone. There are actually many vertical joints in this room that all met up in the center of the ceiling. As they came together, it weakened the ceiling. It's okay to have a weak ceiling in here for a little while though, because this area used to be underwater. As long as there was water in here, it provided support and buoyancy to keep the ceiling from collapsing. Once the water level lowered though, the ceiling lost that support, began to fall layer by layer. You can still see the remnants of each layer up there on the ceiling. Eventually it did stop collapsing when it got to about 55 feet from the surface, formed a dome-shaped ceiling. Due to the way that it formed, we call it a breakout dome. Any questions on this area at all? I'm going to start our last big climb of the day in just a second here. On the way up to the top, use your imagination. You'll see lots of little formations you can make things out of. Last room had cave bacon. This one's got the rest of our breakfast foods. There's pancakes and donuts and fried eggs. A few other things as well, so just keep your eyes open and see what you can find.
So the explorers got this far and through.
The explorers went all the way through the whole 2 miles of it on their first trip through here. They were down here for just about, I think it was about 10 or 12 hours on their trip through here when they found everything. Whereas the first 2 or 3 trips, the first 3 trips that they'd been allowed by the owner, they'd only been down here for 2 hours at a time, and they were checking in and out with her every day. So actually, when she came up and told them we found all this cavern, she thought they were just trying to come up with a cover for spending all day down here goofing off or whatever it may have been. She actually sent her son with them the next day to find out that the caves really were here.
Wow. This is amazing.
See, this is my entrance. Looks like a...
Yeah, is it weird or is it just shiny like that?
This is where all the breakfast foods are at. This is pancakes stacked on top of each other. Little donut right here beside the tray. This is a fried egg. You can see the yolk coming out of the top of it. And after you finish breakfast, you got your toilet. And on the wall there, clown's face. Go all the way up to the top. There's 2 little formations. One right there, the statue of Lincoln. One on the left kind of looks like a dragon.
first discovered the cavern in 1960, they found 2 miles of passages. So there's quite a bit of cave that was actually found, but we don't. Zebulon is formed by water, and most of them flow.
Where does that go to? Doesn't go anywhere. But this room we're in is called the exit tunnel room. It was found by accident as we were digging this tunnel here. This tunnel's man-made, and in the process of digging, they just ran into it by accident. As they were blasting up, that part of the wall back there did collapse, and back behind it, those are the longest soda straws in the North Cavern. They're 2 to 3 feet long. Also in here, it's slightly different looking flowstone formation over there. Heard all kinds of things about that, what that looks like, everything from a seal to a squirrel to a nose to a slug. It was a ghost last week, so everybody has their own opinion on that one.
No, we came out of golf cart.
And then, you've probably heard the saying, it isn't worth the little beans. Right over there we have the little beans. I'm going to show you one last thing before I let you guys go. Look right over here with a very large crystal on the wall there. We'll light up to it and it glows. All the way around there. Pretty much that whole area the light covers there. That's it for your tour today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed yourselves and learned something. And we have a 1/4 mile walk from the end of the tunnel to the visitor center. I'll be making that walk also, so you can ask me questions on the way back. Other than that, hopefully you guys enjoyed yourselves. You have a good day.
Thank you very much, Chris.
What's that?
I'll go ahead, we're gonna pull over here, so.
Oh, okay.
That's fine. You ain't got no. Oh, you don't got it.
That's like a drum. Humans. That's like clay. No, it's human organs.
An escalator, that would be good.
It was
Did you read the sidewalk?
It deteriorates. It's a good place for a tram. When you got no Arkansas, stay in.
Ian. Ian.
That was just me.
Are you tired?
Yes, I am.